Hi. My name is Ruth Koleszar-Green. I'm an associate professor in the School of Social Work here at York University. I'm Haudenosaunee Ogonquit from the Kanakahagan Nation. I am from the Turtle Clan. This video is for non-Indigenous staff, students, groups, and faculties who wish to indigenize their curriculum. This indigenization is the bringing in of Indigenous knowledges, education, and history into curriculum. This is not a decolonial act, as decolonization disrupts and dismantles systematic forms of oppression. Indigenization is the first step that many see in decolonization. There's been a lack of education and a lack of knowledge about Indigenous communities. And so as we strive for decolonization, we know that there needs to be an understanding of this importance. Many people have been wanting to bring in Indigenous knowledge and scholarship to their workspaces. This is a very important and acceptable goal. We as Indigenous folks want to have knowledges, education, and learning about Indigenous history, theory, and contemporary realities present in all spaces. However, there are some cautions and caveats to this. When discussing Indigenous topics, there's a tendency to lean into the problematics or the traumatic histories that surround our communities due to the colonial violence. It is imperative that as Indigenous topics are discussed, there needs to be a realistic lens on how and why there are disparities. These disparities are not Indigenous created, but the creation of domination, colonization, and settler society. Here's an example. I know that there's always a current event topic that it can be unpacked in classes. As I'm recording this video, there are struggles in Nova Scotia as non-Indigenous fishers go against the Marshall decision that Mi'kmaq people have the legal treaty right to engage in lobster fishing. The non-Indigenous fishers have committed numerous acts of violence against the Mi'kmaq people, communities, and lands. These have not been responded to. There is also the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs' opposition to the coastal gas link pipeline that will devastate their territories and the water table for all people. This pipeline is contrary to the Degamont decision. These struggles are not going to go away. Indigenous people are not going to go away. But the relationship that we as Indigenous and non-Indigenous people have to the land, waters, and colonial rule needs to change. This change will happen through education. As I've just mentioned, the Marshall and the Degamont decision. This is an entry point that I would like to highlight. Both decisions are Supreme Court of Canada decisions. They stem from a legal system that has been imposed, but not disclosed, as many people do not understand how these decisions impact all of our lives. As non-Indigenous educators and educational institutions unpack their role in the oppression of Indigenous people, there is a need to acknowledge that this is a contemporary and it's ongoing. In that, many might think that the best way to bring this knowledge into a classroom is to have a guest speaker come in. This is one I caution against. Why, you might ask? Well, for a few reasons. Number one, when a speaker comes into the classroom, they should be there to advance or complement the learning. They should not be the ones that introduce the topics. So I question, what readings and discussions have occurred in the classroom to prepare the learners for a more lived experience? 2, I'm asked to guest speak or recommend a speaker all the time. Usually a guest speaker is offered a small amount of money that does not fully compensate their knowledge. How can you increase this amount? Can you supplement it from your own funds? 3, now here's a big one. I really love my community members and I have long-term relationships with them. It's expected that I don't put them in harm's way. So if you are bringing in a guest speaker, how are you going to ensure that their knowledge is respected and they are respected by the group or the class? 4, there is a push for experiential learning. Learning by doing is an Indigenous pedagogy, so I'm fully in support of this. But I do caution educators from asking students to attend or visit Indigenous spaces. An assignment that is designed for students to go into an event must be structured in a way that the students are not attending to watch Indigenous people like anthropologists and critique our communities. I do have students engage in events, but I'm very particular about the events that they're able to attend. Is the event a ceremony? Then no. Is it an event that is closed space or safe space for Indigenous people? Then no. Is it a panel or a talk given by an Indigenous activist, academic, or knowledge keeper? Then yes. Is it a rally or gathering that brings awareness to an issue like missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited people? Pipelines or treaty infringements? Then yes, please have your students attend. Number 5. I know that Indigenous spiritual practices seem really interesting to many people, and spiritual practices like smudging and pipe ceremonies are important to Indigenous peoples and our cultures. We do have many times where Indigenous events are opened with a ceremony, but if speaker or guest is only asked to come into a space to engage or show their spiritual practice, how does this become performative? Are the people participating really benefiting, or are they engaging in a spiritual practice and worldview that they don't fully comprehend? I know that so many people have amazing intentions. I know that the desire to bring in Indigenous knowledge is because people see the inherent worth. I'm so glad that we are at a time where Indigenous education is not seen as an add-on, but a foundational expectation. I know that this might not be your field of study, but please know there are brilliant Indigenous people that are engaged in all fields. There are a plethora of resources. As you're building curriculum, I have one more caution. Do not expect Indigenous colleagues to provide you with all your reading material or educational resources. There are research guides in the library. I know, I've read them. There are hundreds of films on the NFB, which is always a good time to spend. There's legal documents such as the Indian Act and the Royal Commission on Aboriginal People and many others that provide an excellent articulation of the relationships between Indigenous people and those that have come to join us. There are so many means of finding strong academic sources. Now, I will admit that I'm happy to build relationships with my non-Indigenous colleagues and support their growth. But like relationships with all colleagues, these need to be reciprocal. Please do not email an Indigenous scholar that you don't know and ask them to look over your course outline. Believe me, it does happen. Email the Indigenous scholar and offer to take them out to lunch. Get to know them. Get to know how you can support them. Listen to the struggles they share, but please do not use those struggles to advance your own self-interest. As you build healthy and caring relations, and in some cases, friendship, mutual respect will be the driving force to change our systems. We, as an educational institution, can change. We can change how Indigenous people are viewed in our society. We can change how the governments and organizations engage. We can build a society that's not only including Indigenous people, but we can uphold and live up to the treaty relations that my ancestors sought. Nyawagoa, and I look forward to learning together.